When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.
From the wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska, this is Murder and Mystery in the Last Frontier with your host, Robin Barefield. In a land full of peril and vicious animals, humans are the most dangerous predators of all.
People imagine snow, ice, and bitter cold when they think of Alaska in January. But Alaska is a big place. I live on Kodiak Island in the southern part of the state, and the winter temperature here averages around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. That may seem cold if you are from California, South America, or Australia, but it is not a harsh winter temperature for most of the United States. The following story, though, gives you a feel for Alaska at its coldest. This brutal crime occurred north of the Arctic Circle in January, where the temperature hovered at minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit when someone shot 3 men on a caribou hunting expedition and left them to die in their tent. Welcome to Murder and Mystery in the Last Frontier. I'm your host, Robin Barefield, and I'm broadcasting to you from the heart of the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge on Kodiak Island in Alaska. Bitter cold, a clash of cultures, and a language barrier all played a part in this crime. But the primary cause, sadly, was something we see often in all cultures. A father gave his son a gift he believed would make his son more of a man and help him find his way in the world. Unfortunately, the father did not understand his son and his son's problems, and his well-meaning present ended up causing his son great harm and ending the lives of 3 good men. Kiana, Alaska is an Inupiaq Eskimo village with approximately 300 residents, located in northwestern Alaska, 30 miles or 48.3 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, and 57 miles or 91.7 kilometers east of Kotzebue. The village sits near the confluence of the Squirrel and Kobuk rivers. In late January at the Arctic Circle, the sun rises just before noon and sets in the late afternoon. Extreme cold temperatures hold a grip on Kiana in January, but the folks who call the Arctic tundra home are well adapted to frigid temperatures and limited daylight. On January 25, 1970, a pilot flying a local physician on a wolf hunting trip buzzed low over the Kobuk River and was surprised to spot a man holding his hands above his head. The man was miles from any habitation, standing in the middle of the frozen tundra. When the Cessna flew over him, the man collapsed onto the snow, and the pilot landed the plane on its skis near him. The pilot and doctor soon realized the young man was little more than a teenager, and blood spattered his clothing. He got to his feet and could barely walk as he stumbled toward the plane. The physician helped him into the back of the plane, and the young man told the doctor and pilot he had been part of a hunting party of 4 men. The other men all had been murdered, but he managed to escape. He explained the bodies of the other men were miles away at their camp on the Kobuk River. He said he left them there and walked all night trying to make his way back to Kiana. After telling his story, the young man lost consciousness. The pilot flew the young man back to Kiana, where he was taken to a local clinic. The pilot then radioed State Trooper Bob Boatwright in Kotzebue and told him the story his passenger had just relayed. Next, the pilot flew back up the Kodiak River toward the hunters' camp. He circled the camp and saw one body sprawled on the ground outside the tent, but he saw no sign of life in the camp. Since the sun was dropping below the horizon, he returned to Kiana for the night. By the time Trooper Boatwright and Kotzebue Chief of Police William Stevens arrived in Kiana, it was too dark to travel to the hunting camp. So instead, they went to the clinic to check on the patient. The young Caucasian man was now conscious, and his condition had improved. He told the officers he was 19 years old, and his name was Norman Leroy Johnson, but he went by the nickname Butch. His father was a foreman for the Alaska Housing Authority and was responsible for building houses in small, remote communities. Butch said his father had given him a new rifle for Christmas and had arranged for Butch to go on a caribou hunting trip with 3 Inupiaq men from the village of Kiana, where his father currently worked. Butch's hunting companions were Freddie Jackson, Oscar Henry, and Clarence Arnold, all from Kiana. Butch told the officers a stranger stopped by the hunting camp the previous night and murdered his fellow hunters. The next morning, Boatwright and Stevens flew up to the hunting camp, where they found an 8 by 10-foot tent 50 yards from the north side of the Kodiak River. 2 snow machines with gear sleds attached were parked at the camp. They saw rifles and shell casings near the tent, and several gutted caribou strung up nearby. The body of Frederick Jackson lay sprawled on his stomach in front of the tent. He had been shot several times. Bloodstains led from his body to the interior of the tent, indicating he had been shot in the tent and had stumbled outside where he fell. The officers found the body of Clarence Arnold face down on the floor inside the tent, and he also had been shot numerous times. Oscar Henry's body lay toward the rear of the tent, his hands grasping his pants as if he had been pulling them up when he was attacked. In addition to being shot, Henry had also been hit in the head several times with a heavy object. Multiple bullet holes pierced the tent and the objects inside it. From the changing trajectory of the bullets entering the tent, the officers concluded the killer walked around the outside perimeter of the tent while shooting at it. Numerous boot tracks surrounding the exterior of the tent supported this hypothesis. Officers found shell casings from several different rifles both inside and outside the tent. When Trooper Boatwright and Chief Stevens returned to Kiana, they found tensions high in the community. 3 well-respected men from the village had been murdered, and residents believed the young white man in the hunting party must be responsible for their deaths. Boatwright called the Fairbanks Trooper Post and requested the help of Trooper Lori Shurich. In addition to being the first Inupiaq ever to become an Alaska State Trooper, Shurich was also a former resident of the village of Kiana. Boatwright felt with his background, Shurich would be a valuable asset to the investigation, and he could communicate with the residents of the village in a way other law enforcement officers could not. Let me take a short break. In my most recent novel, The Ultimate Hunt, Troy Horner wakes up in the cold, damp forest and has no idea how he got there. He quickly learns that unless he hides during the day, he'll get shot. It is only safe to travel through the woods at night. He finds a metal box holding bags of sandwiches and bottles of water, and when it gets dark each night, he helps himself to the food and water. He knows he's not alone in the woods, because in addition to the gunshots, he occasionally hears screams. However, he doesn't see another human for several days until he runs into a woman at the food box one night. This is an excerpt from The Ultimate Hunt. Troy hiked for an hour before he saw the red light dimly illuminating the metal box. He walked toward it, but then stopped and took several steps back. Someone was standing in front of the metal box. Troy's heart hammered as he tried to decide whether to run or stand still and hope the person didn't see him. "I won't hurt you," the female voice said. "I'm a prey animal too. Come get your food. We have ham and cheese sandwiches and an apple tonight. Surprise, surprise. You'd think they could give us something else for a change." Troy slowly approached the food box and the woman. When he drew near, he could see her slim outline, but her face and hair were covered with the hood of her coat. "How long have you been here?" he asked. The woman shrugged. "Several weeks. I've lost count." "Do you know what's going on?" "These maniacs are trying to kill us. Before they dropped me in the wilderness, they told me I was a prey animal." Troy couldn't remember it, but maybe someone had told him the same thing, and that's why he thought of himself as prey and the humans with their guns as predators. "We have to do something to get out of here," he said. "There has to be a road somewhere." The young woman shook her head. "We're on an island," she said, "and it's just us and them. Our only escape is when they hit us with one of their bullets." "Are you sure this is an island?" "Pretty sure," she said. "I've been on the rocky beach a few times in my travels." "What should we do?" Troy didn't think it was possible, but his panic was ratcheting up a notch. "We aren't doing anything," she said. "We'll both get killed if we try to hang together. Grab your sandwich and get out of here." "But I mean it," the woman said. "Get out of here." The Ultimate Hunt is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and anywhere good books are sold. With Butch's father present, Boatwright and Stevens interviewed Butch again. Butch said he left Kiana on the morning of January 23rd, riding on the sled behind Freddie Jackson's snow machine. When they arrived at the hunting camp, Clarence Arnold and Oscar Henry were already there and had set up the tent. The next morning, the Inupiat spotted a small caribou herd a few miles from their tent, and they sped toward it on their snow machines. Butch once again rode on the sled behind Freddie's snow machine, but as they crossed over the rough terrain, he could not hold on and was tossed out of the sled. The men feared if they stopped to pick up Butch, they would lose sight of the caribou herd and their chance to supply their village with fresh meat. They continued toward the caribou herd, planning to return for Butch after they shot the caribou. Butch was furious that his fellow hunters had left him alone on the tundra, and he wondered if they planned to return for him. Slowly, he started following the sleds on foot. Butch told the troopers by the time he caught up with the Inupiaq hunters, they had already shot their caribou and were dressing the animals. He said after they returned to their tent for the evening, another Inupiaq man, Clarence Wood, drove up to their camp on his snow machine and stayed for dinner. The Inupiat spoke in Yupik, so Butch did not understand what they were saying, but he said it sounded like a friendly conversation. After dinner, Wood left, and Butch said the men were crawling into their sleeping bags when they heard a snow machine approach their tent and stop. According to Butch, the other men went outside the tent to greet the newcomer, and a fight ensued. He said the stranger started his snow machine and began to drive away, but then returned. Meanwhile, the hunters were getting ready for bed when the stranger began shooting at the tent. Butch said he slipped out of his bag under the rear tent flap and hid in the brush while the stranger continued to shoot at the tent. Finally, the man stopped shooting, got on his snow machine, and departed. After the stranger left, Butch said he went into the tent where he found his 3 fellow hunters dead. He grabbed his gear and attempted to start one of the snow machines, but the engine would not fire in the frigid temperatures. So he began hiking toward Kiana, with the temperature dipping to -50 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 45.6 degrees Celsius, he walked more than 38 miles, or 61.2 kilometers, before the airplane stopped for him. Butch told the troopers he did not shoot his fellow hunters, but he could identify the man who had killed them. As tensions grew in Kiana, animosity toward the few white residents increased. When Trooper Shurich arrived, he calmed the villagers and promised them the troopers would find and arrest the person who had murdered their friends. Trooper Boatwright told Butch and his father to leave the village immediately and fly to Anchorage, where they would be met by troopers for further questioning. Troopers located and interviewed Clarence Wood, the man who had stopped by the hunting camp and stayed for dinner the night of the murders. Wood told the troopers Butch barely spoke a word while he was at the camp, and the other men said the boy had fallen off the sled and had been forced to walk 10 miles or 16 kilometers to the site of the hunt. They said Butch was unhappy about being left alone and was upset at not being included in the hunt. Wood explained he left the camp immediately after dinner and knew nothing about the murders. When Butch and his father arrived in Anchorage, they were interviewed at the trooper office by Trooper Sergeant Tom Anderson, Corporal Dean Bivens, and Sergeant Bill Nix. Nix wasted no time with small talk. He assumed an aggressive posture and called Butch a liar. He said the men were not shot by another Eskimo, and he told Butch it was time to tell the truth. It took troopers less than 2 minutes to break Butch. He admitted he killed Freddie, Clarence, and Oscar. He said after everyone went to bed, he got up to urinate, picked up a rifle, and fired it 7 times into the tent. Then he picked up Freddie's rifle and fired it until it was empty. He said someone came out of the tent and he grabbed another rifle and shot him. Then he went inside and got his clothes. He tried to start one of the snow machines, but it was dead, so he grabbed a rifle and started walking. Butch said he did not know why he killed the men. He felt no animosity toward them. When troopers reconstructed the murder scene, they determined events happened in a slightly different manner than Butch claimed. They found evidence indicating Butch headed down the trail, not realizing 2 of the men in the camp were still alive. When he heard Freddie Jackson try to start a snow machine, he ran back to the camp and shot him. Then he went into the tent and saw Oscar Henry still alive, so he beat Oscar in the head with the butt of the gun until he died. Butch then buried the bloody gun in the snow, where the troopers retrieved it. Butch Johnson was tried in Anchorage in January 1971, 1 year after the murders. Psychiatrist J. Ray Langdon testified on Johnson's behalf and said Butch had suffered a psychotic lapse and was divorced from reality at the time of the shootings. Butch admitted he was disturbed as he watched the Inupiat butcher the caribou, and he felt disgusted when one of the men slit open a female caribou, exposing an unborn calf inside her. Langdon and psychiatrist Barbara Ure testified that Butch had a psychotic break when confronted by the extremely cold weather, the language barrier with the Inupiat, who often spoke in their native Yupik, and the blood and carnage of the caribou hunt. Dr. Ure said he was already insecure as to who he was. Having lost contact with his culture and his geography, he felt displaced. He had absolutely no preparation for this caribou hunt. Butch was indeed a troubled young man. He had been diagnosed with latent schizophrenia, which, if exacerbated, could present itself as a paranoid or persecution psychosis. Butch had a low IQ, struggled in school, could not hold a job. He suffered low self-esteem, and his father believed a wilderness hunting trip might improve his self-confidence. The judge denied Butch Johnson's plea of temporary insanity and found him guilty of 3 counts of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, but ordered he be given proper psychiatric treatment. The judge did not set a date for when Butch would be eligible for parole. Johnson served most of his time in California, and to the dismay of the residents of Kiana and the Alaska State Troopers, Butch was released on parole after serving only 4 years in prison. Butch Johnson's father undoubtedly believed he was helping his son by giving him a rifle and arranging a hunting trip in the Arctic wilderness. But he had to be aware of his son's psychological problems and should have known his issues could not so easily be remedied. Sending his withdrawn son on his first hunt in -50-degree weather with men who spoke a language and observed customs foreign to Butch was not only poor judgment, but could be considered criminal. Freddie Jackson, Oscar Henry, and Clarence Arnold agreed as a favor to Mr. Johnson to take his son Butch hunting with them. And as repayment for their generosity, Butch murdered them. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you to my patrons for your support. Check out the show notes for more information on how you can support this podcast and unlock extra episodes by joining the Last Frontier Club. If you haven't already done it, be sure to join the Murder and Mystery in the Last Frontier Facebook group and chat about the podcast. I'll see you soon for the next episode of Murder and Mystery in the Last Frontier.
When it's PCS time, you know the drill. Pack, research the new base, get the kids in school, because family supports family. At American Public University, we support military families with flexible, affordable online education that moves with you. As a military spouse, your tuition rate is the same as your partner's, just $250 per credit hour. American Public University, education that moves with you. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.